So I had an interesting question from Thomas Militaria asking why it's considered bad to play 1950s era shellacs on early gramophones, and I thought that was worth a video response. Now I've got a few records on the bench here, and I've had a few thoughts about quite why I've recommended that you don't play later shellacs or later 78s on early machines. And I'm going to try and cover a few points, and I'll probably miss some stuff, but let's just have a look and see what we've got. What I've decided to do is actually get out 4 records which cover quite a bit of the sort of era of 78s. I mean, this one here, this is from about 1911. This one here, this is from about 1920. This one 1954. And this one 1957. Now I could have picked some in the middle as well, but I've sort of picked fairly early on and actually quite late on. So essentially the issue is to do with record wear. Now, although these records are all 78s, they differ to the extent that they actually get rather sort of thinner and lighter as time goes on. I mean, this one here, this is actually really quite thick and heavy. This one over here is actually quite light, and this one actually, there's something else about this record which I'll talk about in a minute. For the sake of argument, let's stack them up so that we have the newest first, well, the newest on the bottom, and I'll get a set of scales out here. So some scales here, cheap pair of kitchen scales, and I'm going to zoom the camera in a bit. Now this is not a highly polished scripted video, I'm just kind of making this up as I go along. Well, not making it up, but filming as I go along. So let's turn that on, put that on, going to put it into grams, 0 that. Okay, so hopefully that's showing up on camera. Okay, so this thing here wasn't working. I just couldn't get the camera to pick up the display. So I've gone for a bigger thing here, and I put a little light in over here that you can probably see. So anyway, it's on, and it's 0. So let's put a record on. This is the earlier record, the earliest record. And that is showing 296 grams. And this record here, which is the one from about 1920, that's showing 252 grams. So it's a little bit lighter, not a great deal. And this record here is, that's 178 grams. That's from 1954. And this record here is 140 grams, and that's from 1957. So you can see, although there will be exceptions to this rule, over the years the records have got lighter. So they've got thinner, they've got lighter. And one of the reasons is that the amount of sort of filler, so as well as the shellac, there's also things like slate. So sort of like stone dust actually added to records to help wear the needle down, so that the needle wears and the record doesn't. So the amount of that is put into records was reduced, and that means that later records tend to be softer than earlier records and more prone to wear on old wind-up gramophones. And that's sort of fundamentally the main reason. Now, how much wear you're going to get, it depends partly on where the record was made. Records which were made in America tended to be softer earlier than the ones, say, made in the UK. Now, I also just wanted to cover briefly this record here, because this is something that can catch you out if you are playing later records on earlier machines. This record isn't actually a shellac record. This is actually vinyl, and it bends like a vinyl record. Now, you wouldn't do this to a shellac record, it would snap, but this is not shellac, this is vinyl. And it actually looks really quite a lot like a shellac record. It's at a glance you wouldn't know the difference. It's slightly lighter, but playing that on a old wind-up gramophone, in fact pretty much any wind-up gramophone, is not likely to be good for it. But certainly an older machine is more likely to cause damage to it than a later machine. So why do older machines cause more damage? Well, I'm going to have to move some things around and I'll get back to you. So I would have liked to have used my horn gramophone for this, but this is a suitably old machine, and this dates from maybe 1915, it might be slightly earlier, to maybe the early 1920s, and the tone arm does demonstrate some of the same characteristics as say some of the horn machines, or the external horn machines. One thing which I think is worth just pointing out immediately is that the way it's pivoted, if I just pull it forward you can see it better, it's pivoted at the back, so the whole weight of the sound box and the tone arm goes onto the record. So it's actually quite heavy tracking, and we'll see when I get a new machine out on the bench in a minute that more modern machines actually reduce the amount of tracking force, because they actually have a segmented tone arm. So a lot of old machines, a lot of early machines have this sort of quite heavy tracking aspect. Now, another thing is to do with the way the tone arm is angled as well. So although this is off to one side like this, I mean really, if you think of it, think of the machine as being, and get it, well, let's line it up there. Essentially, it's directly behind the spindle, and the spindle comes and the tone arm comes across like this. So it basically goes into an arc, so it's mounted directly behind and there's an arc there. And although that sort of makes lots of sense, you know, have the needle going from the edge to the center, that sounds fine. It's actually not the best way to design a gramophone, but when machines like this were made, and again we're talking about, you know, I say 1915, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later, they just didn't know. The truth of the matter is they just didn't know. They put machines together based on, you know, did it look okay, did it sound okay? And indeed a machine like this can sound just fine. So later machines actually position the tone arm rather differently. And if you think how a record player positions the tone arm off to one side with a curved end, you can also see that the tracking on record players, which is obviously better, this just doesn't have that style. This is a much simpler arrangement. So anyway, I'm going to get rid of this for the minute. Find somewhere to put it in my workshop. Right, so we'll pop onto the workbench a H&V 101. This doesn't work, this one, so how best? So I think maybe on this camera here, this would be the best place. So if we pull out the sound box, so this machine is more like 1927, 1928, something like that. In fact, for some reason that sound box is twisted round rather further than it should be. I don't quite know why that is. Anyway, let's get a better camera shot. This machine doesn't work, so it was bought entirely for spares. But there's definitely some sort of problem with that sound box on there. But anyway, if we look, you can see that the pivot's over here. So there's a couple of things. First of all, the up and down pivot bit is actually here. It's not here. So the whole weight of this tone arm bit here is not on the record. There's only this bit here that is actually on the record, and is actually tracking from here, and it would be tracking to the centre if this sound box was actually fitted properly. And so it's doing an arc. It's doing an arc like that, and the sound box is also angled here. So basically, it's a rather better arc there than actually having the tone arm mounted in the middle and then just sort of swinging. Let's now something else I wanted to talk about as well, which was sound boxes. So let's find a couple of suitable looking sound boxes. This is a number 4 on here. This is that's an exhibition. This is a 5B. In fact, this is a very late 5B. This will be post World War II. So this could actually have been made. I don't know when they stopped making these, to be honest. But this back plate is apparently post World War II. So I understand, and this is kind of like the last sound boxes that HMV made, whereas this is a HMV made one, or the gramophone company made one, but it's branded Zonophone, and they made these from about 1919. But this design goes right back into the early zeros, back into the early Edwardian era, and they were made in America at that point. I think only made in America. So anyway, this style of sound box, this is sort of typical of what you'll get on an early machine. There may be issues to do with dried up gaskets, but even if you completely resurface one of these, which is entirely possible, so that it's like new, it's not really designed to play as loud records as this here. The diaphragm on this is actually rather more flexible. It's made out of corrugated aluminium. This is made out of mica, which is great, but it's just not quite as compliant or flexible as this one. So later records were recorded rather louder than earlier records, just because they could, and early sound boxes don't always reproduce later records particularly well. You can get sort of blasting, unwanted noises and stuff with early sound boxes, and it can just not sound very good. So that's another reason, but that's kind of more personal taste. Could be argued that the earlier sound box, because it's not as flexible, may wear the record more. I can't honestly say that I know that's a problem, but I could see that's a problem potentially. So anyway, that's a very roughly put together little video. I do normally spend more time setting things up and whatever, but I'd be interested to know actually if this more sort of like pull it out as I go along and talk about it is actually of interest. Do you like this style of video? Apparently more real videos are more popular nowadays than highly polished scripted videos. Anyway, that's enough chatting from me. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you liked the video, please give it a like, and maybe consider watching this video too if you've enjoyed this one. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.